life's a journey. And,
Yep.
and one thing I've learned, it is a journey because we aren't born 40 years old. That would be a
No.
big shortcut.
Yeah, and for me, it's been my racing career in general it's been strange because of the way that it started. And when you look back, I shouldn't say where it started, but where it started in my Cup career, because my first press conference was the biggest press conference that I ever did. My first win was by far the biggest winning moment that I've ever had, and that was all because of the way that you went into the car. But then it all backed up from there, because of, you make a mistake here and you say something wrong, and you make this fan base mad and that fan base mad. These people like it, those people don't like it, and I had to learn all those life lessons along the way, with the Earnhardt fan base following you along the way, and critiquing you. So it was, it all kind of started backwards. So you had to learn quickly how to navigate the landscape of NASCAR racing and Earnhardt Nation there.
Let's remind everybody what happened. We lost the great Dale Earnhardt Sr. Richard Childress says, "You're going to drive this car at Atlanta. You drive it, you win the race." Now, with us reminding everybody that, you didn't start your Cup career the way that you really wanted, or can that be controlled?
No, and really, it all started when Dale died at the Daytona 500, and I got the call, actually laying in bed on a Wednesday night. Richard called me and said, "Hey, I need you to come to the shop." So I lived right down the street from the shop at that particular time. So I drove to the office, and I walked in his office, and it was him sitting behind his desk, and Bobby Hutchins, and Kevin Hamlin. And I walked in and sat down, and they said, "Hey, we want you to drive this car this weekend at Rockingham." And at that point, I had already told my wife before I left. I said, "Hey, they're gonna ask me to drive this car this weekend, and I'm gonna drive it." And so I told them I'd drive it, and we never talked about anything else. We didn't talk about contracts, money. It was, at that particular point, it was all about, what can I do, what is right for RCR. I've been here for a year and a half, and I'd actually been doing all the testing for Dale at that particular time in the 3 car with his team, so I knew the team. So it wasn't really, there was no decision to be made. It was just do whatever. So we went to the racetrack that particular weekend, and ran the race, and then Delana and I flew out and got married on Wednesday.
Oh my, I didn't know that. Hold on.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
you, you win Atlanta?
No, no,
You
no.
no you
No,
you
no. We raced my very first Cup race at Rockingham.
right.
We left that night and had the whole team and my family and her family. We all flew to Las Vegas
Oh my.
for what would have been the third race of the season and my second race. We got married on Wednesday night, and I got my first top 10 on Sunday in Las Vegas, and we flew home and got my first win the next week at Atlanta. So it was a big 3 weeks.
Okay, this is something I never knew. It's not important for me to know everything whatsoever, but I think somehow that slid under the radar to a lot of fans. So at that time, first of all, I want to back up because this is Kenny conversation. We just go. You started this. I love this because I've learned so much. So this is during a tough time, and yet you're getting married, which is the happiest time of your life. Did you have to balance that?
Well, when you go back and you look at it all, and it was really one of the best things that happened during that particular time frame, because I had my whole team there. Richard was there. We had just gone through everything, with Dale and all the downtime, and so it gave the team a chance to come out, to Las Vegas, and not have to worry about the race, and not have to worry about everything that happened with Dale and everything that had gone on, because of the fact that we were getting married and we were going to have a good time and we were going to get our minds off of it. So um, so we got married, and one other funny story that we had that weekend. Richard, I think he was born in 19, gosh, I want to say 40, I don't know, 40 something. And Richard bought this bottle of wine, and it was the year that he was born. I can't remember how much money he paid for this bottle of wine,
A lot,
but
probably.
yeah, probably a lot. So we're flying home, and I was flying with Richard because I didn't have any way to get to the racetrack. So I was flying home with Richard, and he was telling me about this bottle of wine, and he said, "You win a race this year, we're going to drink this bottle of wine." I had never drank wine in my life. The only thing I drank up until that point was the cheapest beer that I could find.
Pabst
And
Blue
so,
Ribbon.
yeah, it's something like that. So we went and won the race next week, and I reminded him. I said, "Hey, we're going to drink that bottle of wine," because I knew that the last thing he wanted to do was open that bottle of wine, and I was going to make him open that bottle of wine after we won Atlanta. So we go to his house for dinner, and he is nervous as crap opening this bottle of wine because he knew it wasn't supposed to be open. Kenny, we went through this process for probably 30 minutes of him trying to figure out how he was going to open this bottle of wine. He puts the cork opener in there, and the cork just immediately just crumbles.
Oh my
We
gosh.
strain it and strain it and strain it, and we finally drank the bottle of wine. And I didn't think it was very good, but it was well worth the effort to drink just because of the promise and the situation. So,
So,
but
so
yeah, those 3 weeks. I don't know if you've ever gone back and watched that press conference at Rockingham, but I mean it was nothing like I've ever experienced in my
mm,
life. It was a dark, rainy, gloomy day. Uh,
appropriate.
it was very appropriate, and it had this makeup, pop-up tent that they had put in because they had so many media that were coming to cover it, and I just remember looking out into that crowd of media, and just, I had no clue what I was going to say or what I was going to do, and I knew none of them were there, because they wanted to be there. But it was, there were some interesting times, but really we made it through that year because we decided to run all the Busch races. We ran all the Cup races. There were no testing limits at that particular point. So we tested the Cup car, we tested the Xfinity car, and they basically sent us off. They basically sent me off, to race as much as I could. We ran our first truck race that year for KHI
Mm.
at at Richmond, and we had, honestly, myself and Delana, and really the guys that I raced with, on the Busch Series car at the time, we had no idea really the magnitude of what was happening. All we did was race. All the problems were masked until 2002, and then the bottom fell out. Trying to address everything that we hadn't addressed the year before.
So I want to go back to that wine for a minute. Did he ever? Two questions about the wine. Did he tell you how much money he paid for that wine, that bottle?
I swear it was like $15,000 at the time. I could
Was
be
there
wrong.
sludge in the
I bet
bottom
you
of it?
there was sludge in the bottom of it.
There
It was
was.
bad. It
That's when
was
it's
it
old.
was clumpy. It was
And they
clumpy
usually
and
put a
bad.
little
I it
candle
was
underneath
it
there.
was it was never intended to open. Never intended to open. Nor it was probably never intended to drink. But we were drinking it.
Okay, so let's go back to what you talked about that rainy day at Rockingham. So I've been a big fan of yours for years. I think it's just because you kind of remind me of myself growing up, kind of a scrapper, just doing your deal. I was born in '63. I know you're a lot younger than me, but I've always liked your ways. So I haven't even got to the start of the interview, by the way.
Perfect.
You're awesome. You're chatty Cathy today. I love you. You're badass. So we get to that Rockingham deal. We go through this whole first part. At when did you realize right away that this was like a dream? This was not the dream you intended. At what point, at what weekend did you go, man, this was never planned?
Well, it was never planned, but I was pretty embedded into the whole thing already, because Dale didn't want to do any of the testing, and the team needed to get better. So in 2000, really at the end of spring, um, we, I got pushed off into testing Dale's car. So basically at that particular time, we were just developing all the 1.4 shocks, the 3.5s and a 2.
And you already said this, but you feel like you are already, what you're saying is you were in Dale Sr.'s car, embedded in it.
Yeah, well, I was embedded in the team,
Yeah.
and so I think for me there were a lot of things that I didn't have to get used to
Yeah.
because of the fact that I had already been around his team. I had already been to the racetrack with those guys, and Todd Barrier was a big part of really bridging the gap of the things that I didn't know, or when I would get frustrated, mad with particular things, or bringing information over from the Busch Series car. Todd Barrier was one of the biggest keys to that whole program because of the fact that he had worked at RCR since probably 1995, I'd say, with Skinner's truck and in the fab shop and all the things that they were doing on Jay Sauter's deal. But he was kind of that bridge because really Kevin Hamlin, great guy, but that whole team was built around Dale.
Yeah.
But Todd knew all those guys because he had worked there, and he'd be the one to kind of smooth things over when I would get wound up, because I was wound up all the time, and just on the chip, ready to go, and wanted things to move, and so those guys. And I guess the point of this is I already knew everybody on the team.
You were ready. You were ready for the job.
I was yeah, if that's what I needed to do, I was ready to go. And my seats were already in the cars. We had already been at the racetracks, and we had already been testing. And I think for me, we would spend days and days and days at Kentucky developing shocks and springs. And the first time that Dale got to drive it, they went to the Indianapolis test, and everything that we had developed at Indy or at Kentucky, they took to Indy. And when they took it to Indy, he shook his car down, and then they took my car out that we had been developing with GM and his guys at the racetrack. Well, it went like 0.9 of a second faster than his car did. And he said, "Well, what's in it for springs?" And they told him at that time it was like 3.5s and a 2, and it had all the new crazy stuff in it.
Crazy.
And he said, "Put that thing back in the truck. I'm not driving it." Right now,
It sounds like him.
because he, he's probably a lot like Rusty was. You had this spring and this spring and this spring and this spring, and you could change it a few 100 pounds in each direction. But when you started talking stuff like that, the motor was all raised up, and it had all the new, the new direction of the sport. He was not thrilled about them not telling him what was in that car, but it was way faster.